Okay, I'm recording. Welcome to Blurry Weekday Somatics. Let's take a moment, just be totally at ease, whatever that means for you. Just that can be an exploration in and of itself. And let's just be at ease and silent for a moment. And let me state my intention for that so that it's clear. My intention is that we can receive from this silence a very deep nourishment. So see if that's possible for you in this moment, just to receive nourishment from this silence, regardless of what you might think, regardless of what judgments you might have about yourself or this moment or your experience. Just see if it's possible to, at the very least, catch a glimpse of this nourishment that is pouring forth from this silence. So we'll just take a moment. Okay, so let's find a posture that we have reasonable confidence that we can inhabit for the next 30 minutes, in which we might, in which we can imagine presently that we could receive this nourishment, that we could receive nourishment from life, from silence, from ourselves, from nature. It's all the same, using different words to point to the same thing. And as usual, be interested, I would encourage you to be interested in the edge where you're you're not pursuing comfort, you're not chasing after it, you're not trying to sink into it, you're not trying to grasp more of it, you're not subtly creating conditions that provoke a sense of anxiety that there's not enough, I might lose it, I have to work hard to hold on to it, there are only certain conditions in which I can experience it. So we don't want to go too far into that direction. Neither do we want to go too far into the direction of pushing, straining, striving, thinking that if I can get it perfect and work really hard, that I will be worthy and deserving of grace. So we don't want to do either of those. Let's find that balance between the extremes, between the polarities, where we are gently awake, present to the experience, and that may be different today than it was yesterday. So be present to this moment and be responsive to the needs of this moment, whatever that might be. So don't hold yourself to some impossible standard that you are drawing from the past. So I want to propose a truly, an actually radical idea. Radical means to going to the root. My proposal to you is that each of us can be reborn right now. So I say this is a radical proposal. So let's look at what that means. Let's look directly, presently to our experience, and let's see what it would mean to be reborn in this moment. So to discover what it is to be reborn, or this possibility of a radical rebirth, We have to, well, we don't have to, but let me suggest that what we can do, what is possible, and what I will propose to you is a desirable option, is that we can be consciously reborn. So to be consciously reborn, we have to consciously die, because we have to be present to the transition. Now, this is a transition that's happening always, by the way, but we have to be consciously present to the transition, because otherwise, what happens? So just look to your experience, see what happens. Can you see how from one day to the next, 1 hour to the next, you take off one costume and put on another, and then you pretend like you are that, you're that costume. Can you see how the person who you believed you were yesterday and the person you believe you are today are not the same? How the person that you were an hour ago and the person you are now are not the same? But how did that transition happen? How did you go from one person to another person, from a confident person to a desperate person, from a happy person to a angry person, from a grateful person to a vengeful person, from a confident person to a terrified person? How did that transition happen? And we don't know, because we weren't consciously present. We weren't consciously present to that death and rebirth. So let's be consciously present to the death and rebirth. So I'm going to propose some things, some ideas, and these are ideas that I am not asking you to believe. Rather, I'm asking you to be present to your beliefs that are provoked by these statements. The beliefs that are provoked are who you are identified as, what you believe yourself to be. And if you're observant, you'll see how out of habit you argue for and struggle to maintain the false identity. It's a painful identity. These are all these masks and roles. So all that is necessary is just to be present. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to analyze. You don't need to judge. You don't need to understand. You don't need to earn anything or merit anything. You don't need anything. I, Let me just tell you two stories. Okay, I didn't know that I was going to tell you these stories, but I'll tell you these stories briefly, and then we'll get to the exercise. But as I'm telling you these stories, I want you to continue to just remain gentle and present, gently aware, aware of the violent impulses, the scary impulses, the stories, the images, the sensations, and how it is that you believe something about them, and just be gentle and present. Keep surrendering. Surrender all the violence, all the hardness, all of the hatred, all of the condemnation for yourself. Just surrender all of it as I tell you these stories. I don't promise that these will be good stories, by the way. The first story is a story from, it's a Christian story. It's a biblical story. It's from the New Testament. I'm not well versed on Christian stories, but this is one of the stories that has impacted me, and I'll share it with you. You may be familiar with it. There was a man named Saul, and he hated Christians more than anyone else. He hated Christians so much that he made it his entire identity, his entire life's purpose was to hate Christians. If you can imagine that, that's true. That was his profession. It was his career. It was his vocation. He was completely committed to it. I don't believe he was married. I don't think he had children. If he did, he traveled a lot. He was away from home because he was busy going here and there, hating Christians, letting everybody know how awful Christians were. Well, he was on his way to uh, Damascus. I don't remember where he was coming from. He was coming from maybe Jerusalem or something. But he was on his way to Damascus, and as he was walking along, occupied with his hatred of Christians, he was suddenly struck by a all-consuming light, and he was paralyzed. He was blinded. He was completely well. All that Saul was completely consumed by the light of Christ. And he was reborn, and his name became Paul. No, you might have whatever opinions you have. You might have opinions about Christians and Christianity and Christ and Paul and all the rest of it. But if you can look past those opinions and those judgments and those ideas, maybe you can receive the gift of that story and see how you are. It's your story. It's your story. The second story, I'll I can't tell this story even nearly as well, and not that I told the first one very well, but this one will be very short. This is a story about a man named Bill who was an alcoholic who had a vision of Christ, and he was reborn. So what does it mean to be what does it mean to be you? Who are you? Now I'll say some of these statements. And as I say these statements, I want you to, or my suggestion to you is to be as restful as possible, to be as surrendered as possible, and then just to watch what happens. And don't, to the very best of your ability, don't get involved. Just watch. I'll make the statements in the first person, and I'll ask that you say them silently, or you can say them aloud, either way, to yourself in the first person. And again, I'm not asking that you believe these statements. I'm just asking that you watch what happens. Just watch the judgments, the argumentativeness, the way in which you have clung to these false identities that are contracted, fearful, and ultimately false, which I believe you will recognize because when the light of truth shines upon them, they cannot remain. So let's see what happens. I am completely safe and protected, always. My every action and every thought is perfect and divinely guided. I am always in the right place with the right people at the right times. All my needs are always met perfectly. My body is perfect in every way. My life circumstances are always perfect. Now, you are aware of all the objections that arise. And I want you to just recognize right now, just lightly allow all of the objections, the argumentativeness, without fighting with it or arguing with it, so that you can really see its true nature. And I want you to recognize that you are aware of the argumentativeness. You are aware of the objections. You are aware of the false identity. It has no power over you. It is not real. When I say it's not real, what I'm pointing to is notice that it comes and goes. Notice what it comes and goes in. What's here when the false identity disappears? What's here when the argumentativeness subsides? What's here when the likes and dislikes disappear. And can you see perhaps that all of the identities, the objections, the memories used to support the objections about how in the past my life was disappointing, it was never enough, circumstances were difficult, I was unhappy, it was painful, my body wasn't enough, I had all these problems, I didn't have enough money, I didn't have real friends, my family didn't support me, I was never okay, blah, 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 blah. So all of that is coming and going. The memories, the thoughts, the imagination, which is really just the memory projected into the future. That's how it's been, so therefore it will be that way. The sensations, the images about what those sensations might mean. Just notice that all of that is coming and going. All of that is movement happening. Waves, up, down, up, down, up, down. Got it, lost it. Getting there, not getting there. I'm okay, I'm not okay. All of that is what we have identified as. When the content that we identified as was so very different from the content that we are going to next identify as, we out of habit go unconscious and make a violent transition. We say, I don't know what came over me. I don't know what happened. I don't know why I'm in such a bad mood all of a sudden. I don't know why I'm so depressed all of a sudden. I don't know why I'm so angry all of a sudden. But here we're watching so that we can see this possibility of a conscious death, conscious surrender, a conscious sacrifice, to really sacrifice completely all of oneself is a conscious death. To surrender all of the ideas, all of the memories, all of the hope, all of the strategies, all of the defenses, all of the argumentativeness, just by gently, lightly being witness to it, just see there's the impulse, there's the attachment, there's the identity. And notice that all of that is coming and going, rising and falling, But regardless of what it is that's rising and falling, you are here. So if the thought comes, I'm not good enough, you are here. If the thought comes, I made a mistake, I'm unforgivable, you are here. If the memory surfaces about all of the evidence for why you're not good enough and why now isn't the right time and why you're not worthy in this moment and why you need to do something else in order to be worthy and why you've got to put it off, you are here. There are no conditions for who you are. You are unconditional. Really, truly. That's why I told those stories. Not to promote a Christian viewpoint, but just those were the two stories that I have access to that clearly illustrate this. The divine does not put conditions on anything. The divine does not judge. The divine does not deny. And that light of awareness that you are able to recognize right now, that in which all of the comings and goings come and go, just look and see that it has those qualities. It is unconditional. It does not deny anything. It does not reject anything. It does not have any judgment about anything. That's who you are. The judgments arise in you, but you have no judgments about the judgments. They are not your judgments. You are aware of the judgments, and your love pours forth unconditionally, regardless of the judgments. You can choose that consciously. You can choose that consciously by surrendering all that is false, by consciously dying and being reborn moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. So we're going to now transition from this formal inquiry and there really truly is a miracle available. And I am confident that each of us has touched upon that miracle and recognized that miracle, or at least had a glimpse of it today. So let this transition be one of continuous conscious death and rebirth, continuous surrender, so that you don't disturb this clarity. If the eyes have been closed, take your time in opening them. Notice the body. Notice the sensation of the air around the body. Notice the sensation of the space inside the body. Notice the experience that you associate with the skin. Notice that perhaps that all those distinctions start to be a little less clear. And know and trust that there are degrees of surrender, and the degree of surrender that is appropriate for you in this moment is exactly what's right for you. You don't need to judge it as better or worse, good enough or not good enough. Just know that the surrender is a surrender to that which holds the entirety of all of creation. It moves the planets. It is the light of the sun. It is the force of gravity. It's the breeze. It's all the functions of your body, your digestion, your thinking. It governs your relationships. So this surrender allows everything to be made more beautiful, more pleasing, because we are learning to surrender to what is true rather than what we have falsely clung to. So take your time opening the eyes, and there's really no rush. If you are finding it enjoyable to keep the eyes closed, you may do so. And if you have the luxury and would like to just even take a nap, that's fine. You don't need to either. But be very gentle with yourself. I'm going to end the recording of the formal inquiry. So for anybody who's watching the recording, thanks for joining.